If you had arrived 10 minutes earlier, we could have saved the baby." 10 minutes. The nurse didn't know that I'd been calling him for over 2 hours. She didn't know that while I was bleeding out on our bathroom floor, begging him to pick up, he was choosing someone else. She didn't know that those 10 minutes weren't about traffic or bad luck or fate. Those 10 minutes were a choice. His choice. And the worst part? I saw it coming. Every single red flag, every lie, every late night. I saw it all, and I stayed anyway. I loved him so much that I loved myself less. I sacrificed everything, my career, my country, my identity, for a man who couldn't even be bothered to answer his phone when our baby was dying. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning to show you how an American girl from Ohio ended up alone in a Seoul hospital room, bleeding out her future while her husband chose someone else. Please don't forget to subscribe and like this video. My name is Emma Brown, and this is the story of how I lost everything to find myself. 4 years ago, I was someone completely different. I was a rising star at a marketing firm in Cleveland, the kind of woman who wore power suits and knew exactly what she wanted. I had plans, ambitions, a clear vision of my future. Then I met Jin Woo at an international business conference in Chicago, and every plan I'd ever made went up in flames. He was beautiful in that way that makes you forget to breathe. Sharp jawline, eyes that seemed to see right through you, a smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We met at the hotel bar after a particularly boring panel on digital marketing trends. I was drinking whiskey, trying to wash away the jet lag and corporate small talk. He sat down next to me and said, "You looked bored in there." I was too. 3 hours later, we were still talking. 3 months later, he proposed. 6 months after that, I was on a plane to Seoul with 2 suitcases and a heart full of naive hope. My mother cried at the airport, not happy tears. "Emma," she'd said, gripping my hands, "you're giving up everything. Your career, your friends, your home, for a man you barely know. Are you sure? Are you really sure?" I'd laughed it off, told her she was being dramatic, that love required sacrifice, that I could build a career anywhere, that Jin Woo was worth it. God, I was so stupid. Seoul was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. The lights, the energy, the relentless pace of it all. But beneath the glossy surface, I felt like I was drowning. I didn't speak the language well enough. I didn't understand the unspoken rules, the hierarchy, the way people said one thing and meant another. I was always misreading situations, always apologizing, always feeling like I was one step behind everyone else. Jinwoo was patient at first. He'd translate for me, guide me through social situations, laugh at my mistakes in a way that felt affectionate rather than cruel. His family was polite but distant. His mother would smile tightly when I used the wrong honorific or held my chopsticks incorrectly. His father barely acknowledged my existence. Our wedding was beautiful. I wore a traditional hanbok that cost more than my first car, white and elegant with delicate embroidery. Jin Woo looked at me that day like I was everything he'd ever wanted. I felt like a princess, like I'd made the right choice. The cracks started showing in year 2. It was small things at first, him coming home later and later, the smell of perfume that wasn't mine, receipts from restaurants I'd never been to, hotels and neighborhoods he had no business being in. When I asked about them, he'd get irritated. "It's business, Emma. You wouldn't understand. Things work differently here." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. So I pushed down my doubts, my instincts, that small voice in my head that screamed that something was wrong. I threw myself into trying to be a better wife, a better daughter-in-law, a better version of whatever he needed me to be. I took intensive Korean classes. I learned to cook his favorite dishes. I smiled through family gatherings where his relatives spoke too fast for me to follow and laughed at jokes I didn't understand. I made myself smaller and smaller, thinking that if I could just shrink enough, fit into the exact shape he wanted, everything would be okay. My friend Soyeon was the only one who saw through it. She was Korean American, had moved to Seoul for work a year before me. We met at an expat meetup and bonded over being perpetual outsiders. She was blunt in a way that sometimes hurt but always came from love. One evening, about 18 months into my marriage, she showed up at my apartment with her phone in hand and fury in her eyes. "Emma, we need to talk." She showed me photos. Jin-woo at a restaurant with a woman I didn't recognize. Jin-woo's car parked outside a love hotel in Gangnam. Jin-woo with his arm around someone else's waist. I stared at the photos, my vision blurring. That could be anyone. It could be for work. Maybe she's a client. Soyeon's face softened with pity. "Emma." I said it could be anyone. My voice came out sharp, desperate. "You don't know him like I do. You don't know us." She left after that, but the seed was planted. I started noticing more. The way he'd smile at his phone and angle it away when I walked into the room, the late-night showers, the emotional distance that had grown between us like a canyon I couldn't cross. I thought about leaving. I did. I'd lie awake at night staring at the ceiling of our expensive apartment and think about packing my bags and going home. But what would I go home to? I'd burned bridges when I left. My old job had been filled. My apartment had new tenants. My friends had moved on with their lives, and the shame of it all, the admission that my mother had been right, that I'd thrown away everything for a man who didn't love me the way I loved him, it was too much to bear. So I stayed. I stayed and I pretended. And I died a little more each day. Then, 3 months ago, I found out I was pregnant. I took the test alone in our bathroom, watching the 2 pink lines appear with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe this would fix everything. Maybe a baby would bring us back together, remind Jin-woo of what we had, what we could be. I told him that night over dinner. I'd made his favorite meal, set the table with candles, tried to make it special. When I showed him the test, he stared at it for a long moment. "That's great," he finally said, his voice flat. Not excited, not overjoyed, just great. "Are you happy?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. "Of course," he said, but he was already reaching for his phone. "This is just unexpected. We'll need to figure things out." He spent the rest of the evening texting someone, his face illuminated by the blue glow of his screen. I sat across from him, one hand on my still, flat stomach, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. The next 3 months were a blur of prenatal appointments I attended alone, morning sickness that Jin-woo didn't notice, and an expanding distance between us that felt impossible to bridge. He was home less and less. His excuses became lazier. He stopped even pretending to care. I threw myself into preparing for the baby. It was the only thing that kept me sane. I read parenting books, decorated the nursery, bought tiny clothes that made my heart ache with longing. I told myself that when the baby came, everything would change. He'd fall in love with our child, and by extension, fall back in love with me. If you're watching this and you've ever made excuses for someone who didn't deserve them, if you've ever loved someone more than you loved yourself, please hit that subscribe button. This story gets darker before it gets better, but I promise you it's worth staying for. The night it happened started like any other disappointing evening. Jin-woo had left for what he called a business dinner. He was wearing too much cologne and his best suit. I knew. In my bones, I knew. But I said nothing. I just watched him leave, one hand unconsciously resting on my small bump, and felt the familiar weight of resignation settle over me. Around 8 p.m., I started feeling off. A dull ache in my lower abdomen. I thought it was just normal pregnancy discomfort, so I ran a bath, thinking it would help. It didn't. The ache grew sharper, more insistent. By 9 p.m., I was genuinely worried. I called Jin-woo. No answer. I called again, straight to voicemail. The pain intensified, radiating through my body in waves. I called him again and again and again. Each time, nothing. Just his cheerful voicemail message, his voice promising to call back soon, a promise as empty as all the others he'd made. By 10 p.m., I was on the bathroom floor and there was blood. So much blood. I was shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. I called him one more time, my voice breaking as I left a message. "Jinwoo, please. Something's wrong. I'm bleeding. I need you. Please call me back. Please." But he didn't. I called emergency services myself, my Korean failing me in my panic, mixing English and Korean in a desperate plea for help. The operator was patient, kind, got my address, told me an ambulance was coming. I called Jinwoo again while I waited, blood soaking through my clothes, cramping so severe I thought I might pass out. Nothing. Not even a text. Nothing. The ambulance arrived. The paramedics were professional, efficient, but I could see the concern in their eyes. In the ambulance, as Seoul's lights blurred past the windows, I tried him one last time. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. Voicemail. "Please," I whispered to no one, "please save my baby." The emergency room was chaos. Bright lights, rapid Korean I couldn't follow, hands moving over me, needles in my arm, machines beeping. I kept checking my phone. No callback, no text, nothing. A doctor appeared, her face grave. She spoke in careful English. "Mrs. Park, we need to operate now. The baby is in distress. Is your husband coming?" I looked at my phone one more time. The screen was blank except for my wallpaper, a photo of Jinwoo and me from our wedding day. We looked so happy, so naive. "He's on his way," I lied, because the truth was too humiliating to speak out loud. They wheeled me into surgery. I remember the cold of the operating table, the bright lights above, someone putting a mask over my face. I remember thinking that if I could just hold on, if I just be strong enough, everything would be okay. I woke up to silence. Not the good kind of silence, the heavy, oppressive kind that sits on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. A nurse was adjusting my IV. When she saw I was awake, her face crumpled with sympathy. "I'm so sorry for your loss." 5 words that shattered what was left of my world. "No," I whispered. "No, that's not. You saved the baby, right? You saved—" "I'm so sorry," she said again. "The doctor will be in to explain everything." I don't remember much of what the doctor said after that. Medical terms, explanations, apologies. But one phrase cut through the fog of my grief and shock. "If you had arrived 10 minutes earlier, we could have saved the baby." 10 minutes. I'd called Jinwoo starting at 8 p.m. The surgery happened at 10:30. Over 2 hours of calling, begging, pleading, and he couldn't be bothered to pick up, couldn't be bothered to check his phone, couldn't be bothered to choose me, choose us, choose our baby. 10 minutes might have saved my child, but 2 hours of deliberate ignorance killed them. I was moved to a recovery room, private, quiet, sterile. I lay there staring at that off-white ceiling, my body empty, my heart emptier, and I waited. Because surely he'd come now. Surely when he finally checked his phone and saw the 17 missed calls, the desperate voicemails, the text from the hospital, he'd rush over. He'd be frantic, apologetic, devastated. He showed up at midnight, 4 hours after the surgery, 4 hours after I lost our baby. I know the exact time because I'd been watching the clock, each minute feeling like an eternity. I heard his footsteps in the hallway, quick and urgent, and for a moment, just a moment, I felt a flicker of something. Hope? Maybe? Or the ghost of the love I used to feel for him. He burst into the room, his face arranged in concern, holding a bouquet of roses that looked expensive and last minute. But I noticed something. In my haze of grief, I still noticed. He was wearing different clothes than when he'd left for his business dinner. A white button-down instead of the blue one. Different shoes. His hair was wet, like he'd just showered. "Emma," he said, rushing to my bedside. "I'm so sorry. I was in a meeting and my phone died and I didn't realize—" What was her name? The words came out of me flat, emotionless. I surprised myself with how calm I sounded. His face went pale. "What? Emma, you're emotional. You've been through trauma. You need to rest." What was her name? The mask cracked. Just for a second, I saw irritation flash across his face. Then he rearranged his features back into concern. "I don't know what you're talking about. I was at a business dinner with clients from—" "Your phone didn't die," I said, still in that eerily calm voice. "You turned it off or put it on silent because you didn't want to be disturbed, because you were with her." "Emma, this is crazy. You've just lost the baby. You're not thinking clearly." I picked up my phone from the bedside table. Soyeon had come earlier while he was still wherever he was. She'd shown me everything. Screenshots, timestamps, evidence I'd been too afraid to look at before. I turned my phone toward him. The screen showed a social media story. Champagne, rose petals, soft lighting, and in the corner of the image, just visible, a man's watch. His watch. The one I'd bought him for our first anniversary. Posted at 9:15 p.m., right when I was bleeding on our bathroom floor begging him to answer his phone. The caption read, "Perfect evening with my perfect person," with a heart emoji. Tagged location, Paradise Hotel, Gangnam. His face drained of all color. "It's not what it looks like," he started. But even he seemed to know how pathetic that sounded. "The doctor said if I'd gotten here 10 minutes earlier, they could have saved our baby." My voice was still flat, but tears were streaming down my face now. 10 minutes, Jinwoo. While I was dying, while our baby was dying, you were with her. You chose her over us. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I used to find endearing. Now it just looked like the nervous tick of a man caught in a lie. "Emma, please. You don't understand. It's complicated. She doesn't mean anything. It's you I love. You and the baby, I'm devastated about the baby. Get out." "What? Get out." I was shaking now, my whole body trembling with a rage so pure it felt like it might consume me. "Get out of this room. Get out of my sight. Get out." "Emma, you're being irrational." "I said get out." A nurse appeared in the doorway, alerted by my shouting. Jinwoo looked between us, his face cycling through emotions. Shock, anger, something that might have been shame if he were capable of it. "Fine," he said, his voice going cold. "I'll come back when you're being reasonable." He left, just like that, walked out of the room, out of the hospital, probably back to her. As he passed through the doorway, I saw him pull out his phone, already typing a message to someone, probably her, probably explaining what an irrational, emotional mess his wife was being. I didn't cry after he left. I was too empty for tears. I just lay there, my hand on my flat stomach, feeling the absence of everything I'd lost, not just the baby, not just my marriage, but myself, the Emma I used to be. The strong, confident woman who knew her worth. I'd lost her somewhere between Cleveland and Seoul, between love and delusion, between who I was and who I'd tried to become for a man who never deserved it. Soyeon came back in the morning. She didn't say anything, just climbed into the hospital, bed next to me, and held me while I finally let myself break. I sobbed into her shoulder for what felt like hours, grieving everything at once. The baby I'd never meet, the marriage that had never been real, the years I'd wasted, the woman I'd stopped being. "This is not your fault," she whispered into my hair. "None of this is your fault. Do you hear me, Emma? None of it." But it was hard to believe her. The voice in my head, the one that sounded suspiciously like Jinwoo's mother, kept listing all the ways I'd failed. If I'd been a better wife, if I'd tried harder, if I'd been less demanding, less American, less me. If you've ever blamed yourself for someone else's cruelty, if you've ever thought you deserve the pain someone inflicted on you, please leave a comment below. You're not alone. And I promise you, what happened to you wasn't your fault either. I stayed in the hospital for 3 days. 3 days of physical recovery while my emotional wounds were still gaping and raw. Jinwoo came back twice, both times with flowers, apologies, and explanations that contradicted each other. First, he'd been at a business dinner and his phone really had died. Then, okay, he'd been with you, Jin, but it was just dinner. Nothing had happened, and I was being paranoid. Then, fine, they'd been seeing each other, but it didn't mean anything. It was just physical. He loved me, not her. Each visit, the mask slipped a little more. Each visit, I saw him more clearly. On the third visit, his patience ran out completely. You know what, Emma? Maybe this is for the best anyway. I looked up at him, shocked into silence. We weren't ready for a baby. You've been depressed and clingy for months. I needed space. I needed someone who understood me, who didn't constantly need reassurance, who wasn't always making me feel guilty for living my life. I was pregnant with your child, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I was alone in a foreign country, trying to be what you wanted, and you were with her, while I was losing our baby. He had the audacity to look annoyed. You're being dramatic. These things happen. Miscarriages are common. It's not like I caused it. You didn't answer your phone. I was busy. Our baby was dying and you were busy. Stop trying to make me the villain here. His voice rose and a nurse glanced in our direction. He lowered his voice, leaning closer. You came here. You chose this life. You knew what you were getting into. I chose you, I said. I chose to love you. I didn't choose to be treated like I was nothing. If you're so unhappy, leave, he snapped. Then his expression changed, became almost smug. But we both know you won't. You have nothing to go back to. No job, no apartment, no life. You need me, Emma, whether you want to admit it or not. He left after that. And for the first time since I'd met him, I didn't watch him go with longing or heartbreak. I watched him go with clarity. He was right about one thing. I had nothing to go back to, but I had something more important. I had a choice. That night, I couldn't sleep. I got up and walked to the bathroom, moving slowly, my body still healing. I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself. Really looked, maybe for the first time in years. I looked exhausted, hollow, like a ghost of the woman I used to be. My eyes were dull, my skin pale, my hair limp. But underneath all of that, underneath the grief and pain and exhaustion, I saw something else. A spark. Small, flickering, barely there. But present. The Emma I used to be was still in there somewhere. Buried, forgotten, abandoned. But not gone. I thought about my mother's voice at the airport 4 years ago. Are you sure? Are you really sure? I thought about all the times I'd ignored my instincts, my doubts, my own voice because I was so desperate to make this work, to prove that love was enough, that I was enough. I thought about the baby I'd lost, the future that had been stolen, the 10 minutes that changed everything, and I thought about what came next. I could stay. I could forgive Jinwoo, pretend to believe his lies, go back to our expensive apartment and our empty marriage. I could make myself smaller and smaller until I disappeared completely, until the spark in my eyes went out for good. Or I could leave. The thought terrified me. Leaving meant admitting failure. Leaving meant going home with nothing to show for the last 4 years except scars and hard lessons. Leaving meant starting over from nothing. But staying meant dying slowly, and I'd done enough dying. I pulled out my phone and called my mother. It was late in Ohio, but she answered on the second ring, her voice alert with worry. "Emma, honey, what's wrong?" And I told her everything, the affair, the baby, the hospital, the 10 minutes, all of it. I broke down sobbing halfway through, barely able to get the words out. She listened to it all without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then she said, in a voice thick with tears, "Come home, baby. Come home to me. Come home to yourself." "I don't know if I can," I whispered. "I don't know who I am anymore." "You're my daughter," she said firmly. "You're strong and smart and brave. And right now, you're hurting. But you're not broken, Emma. You're not broken." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. What if I can't do it? What if I'm not strong enough? Then you lean on the people who love you until you are. You come home, you heal, and you remember who you were before him, before all of this. That woman is still in there, honey. She's just been waiting for you to come back. After we hung up, I sat on the bathroom floor for a long time. My phone in my lap, thinking. The old Emma, the one who existed before Jinwoo, what was she like? It had been so long I could barely remember. But pieces came back. The Emma who laughed easily, who knew her worth, who walked into rooms with confidence, who spoke her mind, who didn't apologize for taking up space. The Emma who had dreams and ambitions and a spine made of steel. I missed her. God, I missed her so much. The next morning, I called my old boss at the marketing firm in Cleveland. My hands were shaking as I dialed, preparing for rejection, for the door to be closed. "Emma Brown," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "I'll be damned. How are you?" "I've been better," I admitted. "Mark, I know it's been 4 years, and I know I burned bridges when I left so suddenly, but is there any chance at all, that you might have an opening? I'm looking to come back to the States." There was a pause. My heart sank. Then, "Funny. You should call. Jennifer just gave notice last week. I was about to start looking for her replacement. Are you interested in a senior marketing manager position?" I almost dropped the phone. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. You were one of the best we had, Emma. When you left, I thought it was a damn shame. If you're ready to come back, the job is yours." I closed my eyes, feeling something crack open in my chest. Not breaking, opening. Like light finally finding its way in. "I'm ready," I said. "I'm so ready." The next week was a blur of logistics. Doctor's appointments to make sure I was cleared to fly, calls with lawyers about separation paperwork, sorting through my things in the apartment, deciding what to keep and what to leave behind. Jinwoo tried everything. Apologies, tears, promises to change, to go to counseling, to be better. When that didn't work, he tried anger, accusations, threats. Told me I was throwing away our marriage over nothing. That all men strayed sometimes. That I was being selfish, dramatic, American. I let him talk. I let him rage and plead and manipulate. And I kept packing. Soyeon helped me sort through everything. We threw away photos, packed up clothes, decided what was worth shipping and what wasn't. Each item we went through felt like shedding a layer of skin that didn't fit anymore. "You're doing the right thing," Soyeon said, folding one of my sweaters. "You know that, right?" "I know," I said. And I did. For the first time in years, I was absolutely certain of something. The night before my flight, Jinwoo came to the apartment. I'd had the locks changed, but he'd charmed the building security into letting him up. He always was good at charming people. I opened the door to find him standing there with flowers again. Always with the flowers, as if that could fix anything. "Emma, please, don't do this. We can work through this. I love you. I made a mistake, but we can fix it. Think about everything we've built together." I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing. No anger, no love, no longing. Just a kind of distant pity for the man he was, the man he'd always been beneath the charming surface. What did we build, Jinwoo? A marriage where I made myself smaller every day while you did whatever you wanted. A home where I was constantly walking on eggshells, trying not to be too much or too little. A relationship where you couldn't even be bothered to answer your phone when I was losing our baby. That's not fair." "Life isn't fair," I said. "I learned that the hard way, but I'm done accepting less than I deserve because I'm afraid of being alone." His face changed then, the mask finally dropping completely. What was underneath was ugly, petty, small. "You think you're better than me? You're nothing, Emma. You were a mid-level marketing manager at a regional firm. You came here, and I gave you everything. Status, money, a life you could never have had back home, and this is how you repay me?" "You gave me nothing but pain," I said quietly. "And you're right. I am going back to being a mid-level marketing manager at a regional firm, back to being just Emma Brown from Ohio, and I've never been more excited about anything in my life." He stared at me, shock and rage warring on his face. "You'll regret this. You'll be back. You're nothing without me." I felt a smile tug at my lips, not a happy smile, a tired, hard-won, truthful one. I'd rather be nothing than be nothing to someone. He opened his mouth to respond, but I closed the door in his face. I heard him standing there for a moment, probably waiting for me to change my mind, to open the door and apologize and take it all back. I didn't. Eventually, I heard his footsteps retreat down the hallway, and just like that, it was over. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. Please subscribe and turn on notifications, because I'm going to be sharing more about my healing journey, about rebuilding after loss, about choosing yourself when it feels impossible. Your support means everything. The airport was crowded with the usual chaos of international travel. Soyeon had driven me, insisting on staying with me until the last possible moment. We stood at the security checkpoint, my boarding pass in hand, my 2 suitcases checked. "You're the bravest person I know," she said, pulling me into a hug. I laughed, but it came out shaky. "I don't feel brave. I feel terrified." "That's what bravery is," she said, pulling back to look at me. "Being terrified and doing it anyway. You're going to be amazing, Emma. You're going to remember who you are, and you're going to build something beautiful." "I'm going to miss you," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I'm a phone call away, and I'll visit. Try to stop me." We hugged one more time, and then I walked through security, turning back to wave at her one last time. She was crying too, waving frantically, and I felt a surge of gratitude for her friendship, her honesty, her refusal to let me lie to myself. On the plane, I had a window seat. As Seoul disappeared beneath the clouds, I pressed my hand against the window, saying goodbye. Not just to the city, but to everything it represented. The dreams I'd had, the woman I'd tried to be, the future I'd imagined, the baby I'd lost. I let myself cry quietly as the plane climbed higher, crying for all of it, the pain, the waste, the lessons learned too late. But somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, between Korea and home, something shifted. I opened my laptop, pulled up a blank document, and started typing. New marketing campaign proposal. Rebuilding brand. Identity after crisis. My reflection stared back at me from the dark window, superimposed over the clouds. I looked tired. I looked sad. But I also looked determined, alive, present. The woman in the reflection wasn't the Emma who'd left Cleveland 4 years ago, starry-eyed and in love. She wasn't the Emma who'd lost herself in Seoul, trying to be someone she wasn't. She was someone new, someone forged in loss and pain and hard choices. She was someone who knew her worth. The flight attendant came by with drinks. I ordered whiskey, the same drink I'd been drinking the night I met Jin Woo. But this time, I wasn't trying to wash away jet lag or boredom. I was toasting to endings and beginnings, to losses that become lessons, to the courage it takes to choose yourself. To Emma, I whispered, raising my plastic cup to my reflection. Welcome back. My mother was waiting at the airport in Cleveland. I saw her before she saw me, standing at the arrivals area with a sign that just said, "My Emma," in her handwriting. When our eyes met, she burst into tears, So did I. We held each other in the middle of the crowded airport, both of us crying, both of us whole in a way we hadn't been in years. "Let's go home," she said. Home. The word felt foreign and familiar at once. She'd prepared my old room, fresh sheets, flowers on the nightstand, my old posters still on the walls. It was like stepping back in time to a version of myself that still existed before Jinwoo, before Seoul, before everything. That first night, I lay in my childhood bed and stared at the ceiling. A different ceiling than the one in the hospital, a different ceiling than the one in the apartment in Seoul. This one had glow-in-the-dark stars that I'd put up when I was 12 and had dreamed of being an astronaut. I'd forgotten about those stars. I'd forgotten a lot of things about who I used to be, what I loved, what I wanted, what made me laugh. I'd forgotten that I used to paint watercolors on Sunday mornings, that I loved thunderstorms, that I could spend hours in bookstores just browsing, that I was good at my job, not because of who I was married to, but because I was smart and creative and driven. The next few weeks were hard. Grief comes in waves, and I drowned in it more than once. There were days I couldn't get out of bed, days I questioned everything, days I wondered if I'd made a mistake, if I should have tried harder, if I was being too harsh. But every time I started to slip back into that thinking, I'd remember the hospital, the phone calls he ignored, the 10 minutes that could have saved my baby, his face when he said maybe it was for the best, and I'd remember that leaving wasn't giving up. It was the hardest, bravest thing I'd ever done. My mother was patient. She let me cry, let me rage, let me process. She fed me, held me, and slowly, carefully reminded me of who I was. "You're a fighter," she'd say. "You always have been. When you were 5, you decided you wanted to learn piano and you practiced every single day for a year until you could play for Elise. When you were 16 and didn't make the debate team, you started your own club. When you wanted that marketing job, you applied 12 times before they hired you. You don't give up, Emma. You never have." "I gave up on myself," I said one night, both of us sitting on the porch watching the sunset. "No," she said firmly. "You got lost. There's a difference. And now you're finding your way back." Starting work again was terrifying and exhilarating. Walking into that office, seeing old colleagues, sitting at my new desk with my name on it, it felt surreal, like I was inhabiting someone else's life. But slowly, day by day, it started to feel like mine. I threw myself into work with a ferocity that surprised everyone, including myself. I had something to prove, not to Jinwoo or his family or anyone else, but to myself, that I was still capable, still valuable, still the woman who'd earned her position through skill and determination, not through marriage. My first major campaign was for a local restaurant chain trying to rebrand after a PR crisis. The irony wasn't lost on me. Rebuilding brand identity after crisis. I knew something about that. I worked late nights, poured everything I had into it. And it worked. The campaign exceeded all expectations. My boss called me into his office 3 months after I started. "Emma, this is exceptional work. I knew you were good, but you've leveled up. Whatever you went through over there, it made you sharper." I smiled, but it was bittersweet. It made me a lot of things. 6 months after I came home, I started therapy. I'd resisted at first, thinking I could handle it on my own, but my mother gently insisted. "There's no shame in getting help, baby. You've been through trauma. Let someone help you carry it." My therapist, Dr. Richardson, was a Black woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense approach. In our first session, she asked me what I wanted to work on. "I want to stop blaming myself," I said. "I want to stop hearing his voice in my head, telling me I wasn't enough. I want to forgive myself for staying as long as I did." "That's good work," she said. "Hard work, but good work. Are you ready?" I wasn't sure I was, but I nodded anyway. Therapy was painful. It meant examining all the ways I'd betrayed myself, all the red flags I'd ignored, all the times I'd chosen his comfort over my own dignity. It meant acknowledging that I'd lost more than a baby and a marriage. I'd lost years of my life to someone who never deserved them. But it also meant learning to be gentle with myself. Learning that love, even misguided love, isn't weakness. That hope, even when misplaced, isn't foolishness. That I'd made the best choices I could with the information I had at the time. You were trying to make it work, Dr. Richardson said during one session. That's not a character flaw. That's loyalty. The problem wasn't that you tried. The problem was that you were the only one trying. Those words broke something open in me. I cried for an hour in her office, grieving not just what I'd lost, but what I'd never really had. A true partner, a real marriage, a man who loved me the way I deserved to be loved. 8 months after leaving Seoul, I went on my first date. My friend from work had set it up, despite my protests that I wasn't ready. "You don't have to marry him," she'd said. "Just have dinner. Remember what it feels like to be treated well." His name was Marcus. He was a teacher, kind and funny and refreshingly straightforward. We met at a casual Italian restaurant, and I was so nervous I almost turned around and left 3 times before going in. But I stayed, and we talked, and he made me laugh. And when the check came, he didn't play games or make assumptions. He just asked, "Would you like to split this, or can I treat you?" Such a simple thing. But the fact that he asked, that he didn't assume, that he treated me like a person with preferences and agency, it meant everything. We dated casually for a few months. Nothing serious, nothing heavy. He knew I was healing from something, though I didn't tell him the full story right away. He was patient, respectful, never pushed for more than I was ready to give. Eventually, it ran its course. We wanted different things. We're at different places in our lives. But we ended it kindly, and I walked away grateful for what it had taught me. That not all men were like Jin-woo. That I could be treated with respect and kindness. That I deserved that. A year after leaving Seoul, I was promoted to director of marketing. I celebrated with my mom and Soyeon, who'd flown in to visit. We went to a nice restaurant, drank too much wine, laughed until we cried. "Look at you," Soyeon said, raising her glass. "Look at what you've built." I looked around the table. My mother beaming with pride. My best friend who'd flown across the world to celebrate with me. My own reflection in the window, showing a woman who looked healthy, happy, whole. "I didn't build this alone," I said. "You both carried me when I couldn't walk. This is ours." That night, lying in bed in my own apartment, a small 1-bedroom I'd rented 6 months earlier, I thought about Jin-woo. I wondered what he was doing. If he was still with you, Jin, if he ever thought about me, about the baby we lost, about the marriage he destroyed, then I realized something. I didn't actually care. The indifference was startling. For so long, he'd occupied so much space in my head, my heart, my life. His opinions, his approval, his presence had defined me for years, and now, nothing. He was just a man I used to know, a chapter I'd closed. I slept deeply that night, no nightmares, no anxiety, just peace. 18 months after leaving, I started painting again. Watercolors, like I used to do before Seoul, before Jin-woo, before I'd forgotten what brought me joy. I wasn't very good anymore. My technique was rusty, my hand uncertain. But it didn't matter. I painted for hours every Sunday morning, losing myself in color and water and the quiet satisfaction of creating something with my own hands. I painted the Seoul skyline from memory, but softer, dreamier, less harsh. I painted the hospital ceiling, transforming that terrible off-white into clouds. I painted my mother's hands, strong and gentle. I painted abstract representations of grief and healing, loss and rebirth. One painting in particular kept calling to me. I worked on it for weeks, layering colors, adding details, scraping away and starting over. When it was finally done, I stepped back and looked at it. It was a woman standing at a crossroads. Behind her, a city on fire. Ahead of her, a sunrise. She was looking forward, not back. Her posture was strong, determined, and in her chest, where her heart would be, I'd painted a small, bright light. I titled it 10 Minutes and hung it in my living room. 2 years after leaving Seoul, I was invited to speak at a women's empowerment conference. They wanted me to talk about rebuilding after major life changes, about career pivots, about resilience. I almost said no. The idea of standing in front of hundreds of women and telling my story terrified me. But then I thought about the woman I'd been in that hospital room, alone and broken, thinking she was the only one who'd ever felt that way. She needed to hear that she wasn't alone, that it would get better, that choosing herself wasn't selfish, it was survival. So I said yes. Standing on that stage, looking out at all those faces, I told my story. Not all of it. Some wounds were still too private, too tender, but enough. The marriage, the isolation, the affair, the loss, the choice to leave. When I finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Then one woman started clapping, then another. Then everyone was on their feet, and I was crying, and women were crying, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: purpose. After the talk, woman after woman came up to me. They told me their stories: abusive marriages, toxic relationships, jobs that drained them, lives they'd built around people who didn't value them. And they told me what they were doing about it: leaving, healing, rebuilding, choosing themselves. One woman, probably in her 60s, gripped my hands and said, "I stayed for 40 years. 40 years. But my granddaughter is in a situation like you were. I'm giving her your speech. She needs to know she can leave, that it's not too late." "It's never too late," I said, and I meant it. That night, in my hotel room, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line made my breath catch, "From Seoul." I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity won out. It was from you, Jin. "I don't expect you to read this, and I certainly don't expect forgiveness, but I saw your speech online, and I needed to reach out. I need you to know something. Jin Woo and I are not together. We never really were, not in any meaningful way. He lied to me too, told me you were separated, that the marriage was over, that you'd both moved on. I found out the truth too late, when I learned you were pregnant, that you'd lost the baby, that he'd ignored your calls. I ended it. I'm so sorry. I was complicit in your pain, and I will carry that shame forever. Watching your speech, seeing your strength, the woman you've become, you deserved so much better than either of us gave you. I hope you find every bit of happiness you're searching for. You've already found yourself, and that's the hardest part. The rest will come." I read it 3 times. Felt the old anger flare, then fade. She'd been lied to, manipulated, used. Just like me. Jinwoo was skilled at that, making everyone around him feel special while treating them as disposable. I didn't respond to her email, but I didn't delete it either. I saved it in a folder and closed my laptop. Some things don't need a response. Some apologies just need to be heard. 3 years after leaving Seoul, I fell in love again. His name was David, and he was nothing like Jinwoo. Where Jinwoo was flashy, David was steady. Where Jinwoo was charming, David was genuine. Where Jinwoo made promises, David took action. We met at a bookstore, both reaching for the same novel. We laughed, decided to get coffee, talked for 4 hours. He was a social worker, passionate about helping kids in the foster system. He was divorced, had done his own healing work, knew what it meant to rebuild. He didn't rush me, didn't push, just showed up consistently, kindly, proving with every action that he was someone I could trust. 6 months in, lying in bed together after he'd made me breakfast, I told him everything. The whole story. Seoul, Jinwoo, the affair, the baby, the hospital, the 10 minutes. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he pulled me closer and said, "Thank you for trusting me with that. And Emma? That man was a fool, the biggest fool who ever lived, because he had you and he threw it away." I cried into his chest, but they were different tears, healing tears, grateful tears. "I'm not the same person I was then," I said. "I'm harder now, more guarded. I have scars." "Good," he said. "Scars mean you survived. And I don't want who you were then. I want who you are now. This Emma, the one who chose herself, the one who rebuilt, the one who's here with me." We took it slow, built something real, something solid. And when he proposed a year later, I said yes without hesitation. Not because I needed him, but because I wanted him. Because he enhanced my life rather than consuming it. Because with him, I never had to shrink to fit. The wedding was small. My mother, Soyeon, close friends, David's family. No expensive hanbok, no diplomatic ceremony. Just us, in a garden, promising to love each other honestly. During my vows, I said, "You taught me that love doesn't require losing yourself. That partnership means two whole people choosing each other, not one person sacrificing everything for someone who gives nothing. Thank you for seeing me, all of me, and loving what you see." There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. 4 years after leaving Seoul, after losing my baby, my marriage, my sense of self, I found out I was pregnant again. The fear was immediate and overwhelming. I took 3 tests, not quite believing it. Then I sat on the bathroom floor, hand on my stomach, and let myself feel everything. Terror, joy, grief, hope, all tangled together. David found me there, sat down next to me, took my hand. "We don't have to do this if you're not ready," he said quietly. "Whatever you need, whatever you decide, I'm here." "I'm terrified," I whispered. "I know, me too, but Emma, we're not them. We're not that story. We're us, and we're going to be okay." The pregnancy was difficult. Every twinge of pain sent me into panic. Every appointment felt like waiting for disaster. My therapist worked overtime helping me navigate the trauma triggers, the flashbacks, the fear. But David was there. For every appointment, every middle-of-the-night anxiety attack, every moment I was convinced something would go wrong. And slowly, carefully, I let myself hope. Our daughter was born on a Tuesday morning, healthy and loud and absolutely perfect. They placed her on my chest, and I looked down at her tiny face and felt something break open in my chest. Not breaking, opening. Like a door I'd kept locked was, finally, safe to open. "Hi, baby," I whispered. "I'm your mama. I've been waiting for you." David was crying. I was crying. Our daughter was crying. It was the most beautiful chaos. We named her Maya. It means illusion in Sanskrit, but also water in Hebrew. A reminder that things are not always what they seem, that what looks like an ending can be a beginning, that water, like people, can take many forms and still be beautiful. Holding her, I thought about the baby I'd lost, the 10 minutes that could have saved them, the grief I'd carried for so long. And I made a promise. To Maya, to myself, to the baby I'd never meet. I promised to never lose myself again, to never make myself small for someone else's comfort, to teach my daughter that her worth isn't tied to anyone's approval, that love should build you up, not tear you down, that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. 5 years after leaving Seoul, I stood in my kitchen, making breakfast for my family. Maya was in her high chair, smearing yogurt everywhere. David was reading the news, occasionally making faces at our daughter to make her laugh. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Coffee was brewing. Music played softly in the background. It was ordinary, beautifully, perfectly ordinary, and I realized something. I was happy, genuinely, deeply, wholly happy. Not because my life was perfect, it wasn't. Not because I'd forgotten the past, I hadn't, but because I'd chosen this, built this, created this life with intention and courage and so much hard work. The woman I'd been in that Seoul hospital room, staring at an off-white ceiling and thinking her life was over, she wouldn't recognize me now. She'd been so broken, so convinced she was nothing without Jinwoo, so certain she'd never be whole again. I wished I could go back and tell her, "You will survive this. You will heal. You will build something more beautiful than anything you lost. You will fall in love with yourself again. And one day, you'll wake up in a kitchen full of sunlight, and you'll realize that the worst thing that ever happened to you was also the thing that set you free. The 10 minutes that could have saved my baby couldn't be changed. That loss would always be part of my story, a scar I'd carry forever. But the lifetime of minutes that came after, those were mine. Every single one of them was a choice to keep going, to keep healing, to keep choosing myself. And I chose well. My phone buzzed, a message from a woman who'd seen my conference speech online. She was in a toxic marriage, afraid to leave, convinced she couldn't make it alone. "Did you ever regret it?" she asked, "leaving when you had nothing, starting over from scratch?" I looked around my kitchen, at my husband making silly faces at our daughter, at the life I'd built from rubble and determination, at the woman I'd become when I finally chose myself. I typed back, "Not even once. The only thing I regret is not doing it sooner. You deserve more than surviving someone else's cruelty. You deserve to thrive. And you will, I promise you, you will." I sent the message and put my phone down. Maya reached for me, yogurt-covered hands and all, and I scooped her up, kissing her messy face. "Mama loves you," I said. "Mama loves you so much." And I loved myself too. Finally, completely, without reservation or apology. It had taken 10 minutes to lose everything, but it had taken a lifetime of minutes to find myself, and that made all the difference.